Hi guys, my name is Marie,
I'm Jocelyn.
and today our setting of choice is going to be hospital food service. And our presentation will be towards kitchen staff, diet aides, diet techs, and dietitians. And our topic is going to be how to avoid unconscious bias towards patients.
So, the main objectives for today are going to be one, recognizing and defining unconscious bias in a healthcare setting. Two, evaluating how unconscious bias affects healthcare systems and health outcomes. Three, applying tips on how to avoid unconscious bias in the workplace. And lastly, to identify future initiatives for further bias training. And these are all objectives we hope that at the end of this in-service training, our employees will be able to apply.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about what unconscious biases are. So the definition is unintentional or automatic favoritism towards or prejudice against people of our particular ethnicity, gender, or social group that influence one's actions or perceptions. Some examples of unconscious biases within the field of dietetics are assuming that obese patients don't engage in physical activity, or assuming that all female patients want to lose weight. And lastly, assuming that a patient who lives below the poverty line is unable to or unwilling to make dietary changes.
So next we have a little photo. We want you to tell us the first words that come into your mind when you see this image.
This activity is supposed to work on addressing our own automatic unconscious biases and instead of acting on the unconscious bias, recognize it and put it to the back of your mind and then treat the patient just as you would to any other patient.
So next we're going to talk about why unconscious bias occurs. So we subconsciously make unconscious bias because it's natural for our brains to take shortcuts by making assumptions about others. Our brains subconsciously sift, sort, and categorize information in an attempt to make sense of the world and better understand our surroundings and people around us. We create generalizations from recognizing patterns and associations based on past experiences and lived interactions, and that's why unconscious bias occurs.
So next we have a picture that demonstrates of some examples of unconscious biases within healthcare, and it says sexual identity, sex and gender, education, socioeconomic status, ableism, age, overweight and obese, racial bias, and geographic location.
So this is a little pamphlet. We'll have them provided at the end of the training, and just to let you know what type of biases exist in healthcare.
Yes. And now we're going to talk about how unconscious bias can affect healthcare. So obviously it affects patient and clinician interactions. Doing so is, or assessment, diagnosis, treatment can all be compromised when clinicians express bias towards others. And this will lead to a patient losing trust in the clinician and eventually not seeking out medical help when they need it. Hiring and promotion can also be affected by unconscious bias. Some staff might not get the same promotions as others based on unconscious biases from the manager. Other staff might not get hired because of unconscious bias, and some new hires might also receive less pay than someone in a similar position with the same experience as education as them.
So how does unconscious bias affect healthcare? Why is it important? So another reason is because it affects health and treatment outcomes. Non-white patients often receive fewer cardiovascular interventions and renal transplants than white patients. Black women are more likely to die after being diagnosed with breast cancer. Non-white patients are also less likely to be prescribed pain medications. Black men are less likely to receive chemo and radiation therapy for prostate cancer, and they're also more likely to have their testicles removed. Patients of color are also more likely to be blamed for being too passive about caring for their health when the real reason may be because of their culture. Black women are also more likely to die during childbirth.
And now we're going to go over some tips for avoiding unconscious bias in the hospital. So first of all, take time to reflect to and address your own unconscious biases. And based on your own unconscious biases, spend time educating yourself on different cultures, religions, and belief systems that you find yourself being biased towards. Make a conscious effort to provide equal levels of care to each patient. No matter what someone looks like or who they are, everyone should be treated and cared for the same way. Be mindful of the language you use when you're communicating with patients. Ensure that you're not using offensive, dismissive, or racist language. Avoid stereotyping based on age, race, language spoken, physical appearance, weight, gender, ability, sexuality, socioeconomic status. Consider that people in hospitals are at their most vulnerable state, so we need to make sure we're caring for them really well and being very attentive to their needs. And collaborate with colleagues to address unconscious biases, and don't be afraid to speak up when you hear unconscious bias.
So next, we're going to talk about bystander interventions. And the importance of this is because there's often occurrences when you'll witness a coworker showing bias towards a patient. And this is just to teach you what to do about it. And so a bystander is defined as someone who witnesses harm or injustice being done, yet does nothing about it, does nothing to intervene. And raise your hand if you have witnessed unconscious bias in the healthcare system before. Would anyone like to share their experience? Great, thanks.
So some tips for responding to a coworker that's showing bias towards patients would be, first of all, remain calm and professional, and then wait to address your coworker until after the interaction occurs, unless it's like a really bad situation. Attempt to educate them on how they displayed bias towards a patient, and make sure to be very respectful and like not condescending when you're educating them. Try to offer an alternative thing to say instead, or just give suggestions on how they can improve on their unconscious biases. Suggest that your coworker apologizes to the patient the next time they have an interaction, or go back into their room and go apologize to them. Mm-hmm. And if your coworker happens to be very defensive or disagree with what you're saying to them, or they continue to show bias towards patients in the future, you might want to consider documenting the incidences and talking to your supervisors about it, or HR about it.
Okay, so now we're going to perform a little skit where I'm the patient and Marie is the registered dietitian.
Yes. And then we're going to have you guys tell us what I did wrong and how you would respond as a bystander if you witness this interaction. Okay. So, hi, my name is Marie. I'm going to be your dietitian today. What's your name?
Hi, my name is Jocelyn.
How old are you, Jocelyn?
I'm 22.
Wow, you look really young. I thought you were in high school. Are you sure you're even old enough to be here? So what are you in here for today? You look relatively healthy and skinny and like you look fine. Like, what can I do for you?
I want to eat more vegetables.
Oh, interesting. Mm-hmm. Well, what do you normally eat? Like, what's your favorite food? What's your go-to?
I enjoy eating pasta.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, just think about how that interaction went and how I was being biased towards her, and what would you say to me in response?
So now we're going to go over future initiatives to further prevent unconscious bias. So first, we think we're going to incorporate more cultural competence training for you guys, for our coworkers. And we're going to incorporate more awareness training. We're going to encourage the management to hire a diverse workforce, develop or modify patient care process protocols for assessment, diagnosis, and plans of treatment. We're also going to make it a thing to do quarterly performance evaluations, and also require our management to provide resources and continuous support for addressing and preventing unconscious bias.
Thank you guys. If you have any questions, reach out.